So this is continuing. This is continuing the diagnosis of Tower Hamlets Council in the context of the fact that we are diagnosing and updating the fact that Tower Hamlets Council is a corrupt council in the context of the latest news of the latest housing fraud allegation and charging. In order to share the actual inner evidence of the inside working, we shed light on some of the evidence that we have exclusively obtained on a multi-tiered, T-I-E-R-E-D. The tier is in the same sense as the current pandemic tier. So this information actually covers the series of corruption and criminality and lying by Lutfur Rahman while he was incumbent in the post of elected mayor for 6 calendar years, and the lies he allowed to be perpetrated by the others that were in various posts. Now, all these people who were in the various posts and we are focusing on were in terms of the money they were getting and in terms of the titles that went with their names and the parks and extra facilities that they got. Most of them, except some of the stuff that I will kind of identify as not being as senior kind of post holders, but simple administrative staff. For example, the one that I'm going to mention about the 4th of July, 2013 email that she sent me at 9:46 a.m. called Miss Louise Fleming. She was a Democratic Services staff and she was called a senior committee officer, but she wasn't making the senior decisions because the actual decisions were being made by others. For example, like John S. Williams, who was the head of the so-called Democratic Services. And he was in effect the kind of, he was also the second defendant of the two defendants in the petition that was filed in 2014 after the 22nd of May 2014 council and mayor elections in Tower Hamlets. John S. Williams was the second defendant, and the first defendant or respondent was Lutfur Rahman. And in the course of the proceedings of the election petition, or during the procedural stages, for reasons that have not yet been publicly stated anywhere. When I said this, today is the 2nd of November 2020, so it's a very good six years since they filed the petition. So that's 5 years, 6 years. And there hasn't been any reason why John S. Williams was dropped as a kind of defendant by the petitioners. So the main liars in those 6 calendar years continued the lying of the previous years. So let's kind of systematically identify each part of the lying, and then we can have a factually, evidentially representative, accurate summary and picture of how Tower Hamlets Council perpetrates corruption and criminality. And as I said, the council includes the elected mayor in post at the time and the other holders of the posts that were getting exorbitantly high sums of money and were designated as directors or managers or whatever. Now, this one is an email timed at 9:46 a.m. on the 4th of July, 2013, and it has been sent to me. It was sent to me by Miss Louise Fleming, Senior Committee Officer, Democratic Services, London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Now, her email reads, Dear Mr. Huck, I write to confirm that the action arising from last night's cabinet meeting is that Miss Jackie Odunoy, Service Head Strategy, Regeneration and Sustainability, will speak to you regarding your public question. And if there were any issues you felt had not been addressed, this would be an opportunity to discuss these. Then you will receive a formal response in writing. I will pass your contact details to Ms. Odunoy and her office will make contact with you, which already happened because Nicole Layton wrote to me confirming that Jackie Odunoy was busy, but she would contact me within a day or so, which Jackie Odunoy didn't. So these two staff, Louise Fleming and Nicole Layton, were not involved in the criminality. That is what I'm distinguishing. As I said, I distinguished. They were just doing what would be expected in a normal kind of set of administrative kind of communications. The significant thing about the email by Miss Louise Fleming is this. She refers to Jackie Odunoy being scheduled to speak to me regarding my public questions. Now, Jackie Odunoy did not acknowledge that she was going to speak to me. So the information as contained in that email by Miss Louise Fleming must have been the information that was kind of created between the time I finished putting the question on the 3rd of July 2013 and the end of the kind of time when they had kind of after the meeting discussion, whoever did the discussing. It could have been involved. It could have involved Jackie Odunoy and Luther Roman, or it could have been just Luther Roman, or it could have been Jackie Odunoy. Whoever it was, this was the fact that they told me at that time that Odunoy is going to speak to me. Well, the expression should have been speak with me, but let's put that one aside. But she never spoke with me or to me. What Jackie Odunoy did instead was to delay kind of communicating to me. And when she did communicate, she lied. She added lies, new lies. So that's the email that is part of the evidence. Although it's a short one from Miss Louise Fleming, 9:46 in the morning of 4th of July 2013. That is a key part of the evidence, which contains the statement of position to me that was never actually adhered to by Jackie Odunoy. The other thing about the putting up questions to the cabinet chaired by the incumbent mayor, whoever it is that up to the time that I last had any contact with the Tower Hamlets Council about the cabinet, questions to cabinet being minuted, I was told that they are not part of the proceedings of the cabinet. How can they be? There is the chair and there is me presenting the question or the comment or asking the question. How is that not part of the proceeding? What is it? So I asked that question at the time, and I asked that question since. And I put the same question, constitutional question, to the Department of Communities, whatever, which is supposedly the direct kind of UK central government department that is directly, quote, responsible for the conduct of the local councils. And I never got any answer. And in the 5 or 6, I would say, to be on the safe side, 5 weekly programs that I presented live on a channel that is no longer broadcasting, but it was broadcasting in May 2016. I presented 5 programs called the Kudilar Campaign Program. I presented and I wrote and I kind of researched. I read out and I referred to, just like I'm doing here, the various evidential points about the contacts, seeking information, confirmation, and answers from the Tower Hamlets Council as well as from the UK Central Government Department for Communities and whatever that Eric Pickles had fronted. And at the time in 2016, it was the husband of Dido Harding. Now, husband of Dido Harding is still an MP, but he is not a member and not a kind of Secretary of State, but he was a minister, I think, or it was probably his remit, the council, whether it was as a Secretary of State or as a minister. And Dido Harding's husband was the one that was kind of in post at the time, that was dealing with the issues that I was raising about Tower Hamlets Council. And the issues I was raising in April and May 2016 included the behavior of Tower Hamlets Council criminals and the behavior and the role of the ministry in holding to account that department. And remember, that was 2016, which was second calendar year after Lutheraman was ousted and John Biggs was the one put in place on the 11th of June 2015. And the questions included the behavior of the gang of crooks called Tower Hamlets Community Housing and the behavior of the gang of crooks called Popla Harka and the behavior of the criminal called Michael Tyrrell, who was the chief executive at the time still in the Tower Hamlets Community Housing, and the crook that had begun a kind of war of attrition against any anti-racist that he could find in Tower Hamlets, so that he could target them for loss and detriment because they were doing the opposition to racism. Now, this Michael Tyrrell is the second racist in Tower Hamlets that all the Bangladeshi councillors and Bangladeshi kind of Labour Party members, wannabes, have expressed positive opinion about at various times, including a member of the Tower Hamlets Community Housing Board that was not a councillor but is a person who lives in a flat off the Hanbury Street. And all of them at various stages responded in an identical way and praised Michael Tyrrell. And as I was the target of Michael Tyrrell's racist attacks and harassment and conspiracies, I was surprised that they were all expressing identical positive opinion about Michael Tyrrell. So I investigated, and the investigation takes the form of asking them to provide chapter and verse as to what was the ground for their praising Michael Tyrrell. Now that all of this was happening 5-6 years ago, let's say 7 years ago, 8 years ago, depending on which particular aspect of Tyrrell's racist criminality we are talking about, because he started his racist criminality in July 1996. So that is 24, nearly 25 years ago. And at no time has any member of the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, or any Labour Party member of Tower Hamlets Council, or any Bangladeshi Labour Party member on Tower Hamlets Council has answered any of my questions. Now that's a general kind of factual statement that they don't answer. And this one was about Michael Tyrrell, and they didn't answer. And this one about Michael Tyrrell and Tower Hamlets community housing, and they didn't answer. So therefore, I asked them questions that took up time that would have warranted or required the time and resource and energy of dozens of people in the same time. So you multiply and add up all the work and all the hours and all the days and all the months that had to be put into the action, seeking the information and the evidence. And you can see just how phenomenal the task has been. And if you then multiply and expand across the decades that I have been doing the same thing in relation to every single other criminal before Mike Tyrrell, the criminal racist, came into place, you can imagine just how much work I've been having to do in order to establish the evidence. Nobody has done this. So that is an exclusive part of the identity of this program and this service and this investigation. It's an exclusive world diagnosis of the Fleet Street media, because the Sun newspaper is the one that broke the story, calling it its exclusive about Afsana Begum. And it said that Afsana Begum had been charged with 3 counts of fraud on housing. So during the day today, this is Monday, I spoke with one known member of the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets. I'm not naming them, except to say that I did speak to them during the day on Monday, the 2nd of November 2020. And I spoke to another person, another member of the community in Tower Hamlets, who had been a long-standing member of the community in Tower Hamlets, and I asked them about this particular information or news that Afsana Begum had been reportedly charged with 3 counts of fraud on housing. The first one, the Bangladeshi member of the Tower Hamlets Labour Party, the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, did not express any cohesive commentary or narrative, except to say, which is absolutely correct, that these persons who are getting involved in fraud and similar are bringing the Bangladeshi community in disrepute. The Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets in the UK into disrepute, which is a fairly factual kind of comment. And the other one, who is not a Labour Party member in Tower Hamlets to my knowledge at the present time, said that they didn't even notice any of the kind of, if there was any mention of this particular charging of this MP on any of the channels that are kind of run in the name of the Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets and in the UK. And that person said that they did not kind of really watch Bangladeshi television channels being broadcast from Bangladesh. Essentially what is happening is that the fact that the main Fleet Street kind of newspapers, and I had to say to the person that it had been actually mentioned in the Sun first and then in the Guardian and the Daily Mail and other mainstream Fleet Street papers. What is happening is that essentially the readers and members of the public that are in the UK who are not Bangladeshis themselves are getting the impression that the Bangladeshis are a community that has so many crooks in it or suspect characters, which is absolutely correct on the evidence. Because whenever there is any online kind of forum or opportunity for people to post comments on such allegations and kind of information, there is almost identical kind of expression of contempt collectively for the Bangladeshis, as immigrants, and as Muslims. And the opinion, about 90% of the opinion posted, that is hostile, and it treats the image of the Bangladeshis with unhidden, unconcealed derogation and contempt. Now, how can any community, in the context of migration and the context of rising racism, but racism has never stopped rising in this country, how can a community, because this is a community collectively, individual members of the community, Bangladeshis, may not be in contact with or even aware of these perpetrators or convicted fraudsters. But that is not what the person who is not Bangladeshi and a white person or members from the other backgrounds, they don't know the difference between the one who is doing the crime and the ones who are absolutely innocent and nothing to do with the perpetrators of the crimes or the abuses, which is what we shall be discussing when we discuss the role of Lutfur Rahman as the chief liar in the council in the context of these fraud allegations and actual proven fraud. Because one of the councillors who got kind of charged and prosecuted and convicted and jailed was for most of the times that Lutfur Rahman was in post, a member of Lutfur Rahman's side on the council. So this is, and Lutfur Rahman has not expressed, as far as I can find, any evidence. I cannot find any evidence of Lutfur Rahman ever having expressed a genuine, spontaneous kind of statement of policy against criminal behavior by the council staff or councillors. In fact, when he was still in post, he featured more than once. And that was before he got a petition against him by these people, 4 persons, in 2014. So from the calendar year of his election, 2010, October 2010 to 2011, 2012, 2013. So these 4 calendar years, Lutfur Rahman was very much in situ, that is in post. And during those years, I made hundreds of contacts, straightforward contacts, evidential contact, legal contacts, lawful contacts, constitutional law, ethical, moral, democratic, accountability, transparency contacts. with Lutfur Rahman directly or through Alibor Chaudhry, asking the simple question: why is Lutfur Rahman allowing the criminals to carry on the crimes, and why isn't he stopping them, and why is he wasting my time, energy, and resource? What is the complication? What is the complexity? And in one voice, although they spoke separately, in one voice they said that Lutfur Rahman was doing the right thing and he was attending to it. They never once said that Lutfur Rahman was disagreeing with anything I was saying, or that they were disagreeing with anything I was saying to Lutfur Rahman about Lutfur Rahman's role. Not every single communication is on the record, but a large number of communications are still on the record. And there is no evidence. There is no evidence that any of them, those communications that is, contained any credible or actual evidence or indication that Lutfur Rahman had any ground to justify his lying stance. And Lutfur Rahman was the subject of internal, informal kind of communications among some members of his so-called cabinet. And many of them are now at large in the community, and they're not, as far as I can see, not actively aligned with him. Some are, but most of them are not. That is the impression I get at this date, today, the 2nd of November 2020. And I had hundreds of communications, as I say, directly sent to Lutfur Rahman. I had hundreds of phone calls made to Lutfur Rahman's number, and Lutfur Rahman knew my number, the number I was calling from. And most of those numbers, calls from that same number, Lutfur Rahman chose to ignore, not to answer. Not because it was difficult for him to understand why this call was being made, nor because he was doing something more important than I was doing. It was his lying. Supposing he got a call and it was a missed call and he knew the number the missed call was from, and he was at the time either busy having a meal, or he was indisposed, or he was asleep. When he saw that there was a missed call, and if he was in good faith, he would have called me back or sent me a text, because he knew the only reason was asking him the question as to why he was failing to do his job, which is what I was telling him. Now, I was not able to tell him the full details, because when I spoke to others who spoke on his behalf to me and kept assuring me that he was fully committed to supporting my claims and rights and generally be helpful, he wasn't any of those three things. In January 2013, Lutfur Rahman made a number of trips to the Middle East. Now, at a significant time before that, I had told Ted Jory, the racist, that he should be inquiring into Lutfur Rahman's travels abroad. But the self-rated investigative journalist, Ted the moron Jory, did not understand my question. He must understand it now. I said to him that Lutfur Rahman was making travels abroad. My statement to Jory was not any more than that, but that should have been enough. I knew more than I told Jory or anybody. And what has happened is that Lutfur Rahman was making these trips under the guise of doing the Umrah. Umrah Hajj in the Saudi kind of city of Mecca. And he took the entire sort of cabal surrounding him, with him. That was not a religious kind of duty he was performing. He was doing something else, whatever it was. And so therefore he was guising, he was disguising, he was dressing up those things as a religious thing. And people who came to know about this trip in January loudly wondered to me, what is he doing? What on earth is he doing going to the Umrah? He's supposed to be the mayor of Tar Hamlets, and there are so many things to do. And the reason I came to know about his trips to, quote, for Umrah was because I was asking him daily questions based on the updated information I had gathered of the updated state of the degeneration of the activities by the criminal Colin Cormack on the one hand, and the criminals, other criminals involved, as affecting other aspects of the criminality that they had caused against my rights and against the rights of the community concerned. When I asked them where he was, they said he's going to Saudi Arabia to do the Umrah tomorrow. So whatever the date in his passport, if he has not altered the passport or lost it and replaced it, would show the date when I was doing the communicating. It was January 2013. And the details of the time, because I was working like 24 hours I was working to establish why Lutfur was lying every day to me. And I found all these evidence that he was completely irresponsible about his duties and about his obligations as the incumbent in the post of elected mayor. Now, Sadiq Khan and Andy Barnum have been talking about the regional mayors and the kind of responsibility that Boris Johnson fronted government owes to the local areas, and the responsibility Johnson's administration has to communicate with these mayors in view of the reimposition of the lockdown and the impact, mainly the losses that the majority of the communities are facing. Every day for 6 calendar years, starting from the last kind of week of October 2010 until the day, Thursday, the 23rd of April 2015, when Lutfur Rahman was kicked out. Unless I was busy traveling or doing something urgent that prevented physical contact with the council or Lutfur Rahman's cabal, with those exceptions, and unless I was kind of doing the naturally required resting, I was concerned at the audacity of this criminal gang in ignoring their basic duties and causing me to spend even more than 1 hour, because it didn't need more than 1 hour to resolve the issues. So if they could do that to me and my time, what could they do to the community that is completely pre-Lilliputian in many cases? Not just Lilliputian, but in terms of the intellectual application, most of the people in the relevant context behaved like pre Lilliputians. What was he doing to them? And what he was doing to them was left to Richard Morey to put in words. That Lutfur Rahman had got in by using corrupt and fraudulent means. In other words, he was a crook. He was corrupt. Now, the terms of the ruling by Morey obviously were couched. The actual sentences were couched in a particularly complacent language because the empirical evidence based on the losses caused by Lutfur Rahman to thousands of people in tar hamlets, that experience is not available to the likes of Richard Morey. For him, most of what Lutfur Rahman did, although he did corruptly and fraudulently, was somewhere else on another planet. It didn't impact on the life of Richard Morey. So it was theoretical. And we shall be looking at the representative samples of what Morey said. So here, let's say, how many times does he say? I mean, he says, Morey says, as I said, a person shall be guilty of a corrupt practice if he is guilty of bribery. And a person shall be guilty of bribery if he, directly or indirectly, by himself or by any other person on his behalf, gives any money or procures any office to or for any voter or to or for any other person on behalf of any voter or to or for any other person in order to induce any voter to vote or refrain from voting or corruptly does any such act as mentioned above, etc., etc. What I'm saying here is that Richard Morey, quote, QC, in his ruling on the 23rd of April 2015 and of the 23rd of April 2015, devoted a significant amount of his ruling to the assessment, evaluation, and explanation of corruption by Lutfur Rahman. Now, if Lutfur Rahman was not as idiotic as he has turned out to be, not only corrupt, but also idiotic and stupid, he would have listened to my advice that I gave him within less than 10 days of his so-called election. And I gave him the advice on the Friday, the 29th of October 2010 in Brick Lane. And if he had listened to my advice, he would have avoided all these corruption. Quite apart from the fact whether he stayed in the post or not, different matter, but he would not have been declared a crook by a judicial kind of process. The election petition is a judicial process. And what happened was that Lutfur Rahman was treating with contempt the whole Bangladeshi community, all the Asian people, if you like, except any white-skinned advisor. So that way he, Lutfur Rahman, behaved as an worst example of what T.B. Macaulay had anticipated would happen. And in our language, in my language, he was behaving like a worst example of the ethnic surrogate and the worst example of the mental slave. Because to Lutfur Rahman, what I said, because it was not coming from a straightforward white skinned person, lacked the urgency and the application that it would do if it came from George Galloway or Ken Lying Still Livingstone. So the mental slavery and stoogery and criminality of Lutfur Rahman has cost the community severe losses. Severe losses that Lutfur Rahman in his rest of his life and all his relations and family members put together will never be able to understand even a fraction of. And that he did for no reason that he could kind of lay at me, because I didn't ask him any illegal question. I didn't ask him any unlawful question. I didn't ask him anything outside of the law or of the duties of the council. And he ignored this. And as I said, there is nobody in the whole of the Bangladeshi community who would have given him the benefit, even a thousandth of a benefit that I gave him. And he has disgraced the community, not only as being declared a crook and a fraudster and a liar, but he has disgraced and devastated the community for a very long time to come. By community, I include not just the Bangladeshis, but the wider community, wider society. Because the fact that Lutfur Rahman was ousted for lying, that is the fact. All my campaigns have been against lying and liars. And I was the last person that he should have lied to. And I was the last person at that time, during the 6 calendar years, that any of his lying cabal should have lied to on his behalf. So all of these, I'm saying, in order to create the evidence-based, directly evidence-based picture of Tower Hamlets Council as a cesspit of corruption and criminality, where housing fraud, any other fraud, is the kind of norm. So whether an individual, whether they are accused at the present time or not, is suspected of being involved in shifty, criminal, unlawful things by abusing Tower Hamlets Council, it would not be a shocking exception. It would be the expected norm. And that had been the case about Tower Hamlets Council even before Lutfur Rahman left the school and became a kind of youth. He was introduced to me in 1980 as a youngster, as a youth, as a teenager, by a group of my former students in the Greater X Street. And they all called me sir. I mean, it's a norm. So when he became a councillor, he started calling me Baisab. There was no basis for Lutfur Rahman calling me Baisab. I'm either older than his father, who died recently, or I am as old as his father. There was no basis for this stupid relationship to be fantasized and based on a fantasy. I'm not his Baisab. And there was no connection with him or his family before I came to this country. And there had never been any relationship in terms of Baisab or family. Calling me Baisab reduced his obligation to me and to the community. I am a known constitutional law activist and international law campaigner of the longest possible kind of range and credibility on the evidence. If I were a George Galloway, he would have knelt before me and saluted me and touched my feet, which is exactly what they have been doing to George Galloway when he got in to Brick Lane, and they put him on their shoulders and they carried him on their shoulders on any number of occasions. There is no law in the common law of England, nor in any acts of parliament, nor in the case law that justifies the lying, the number of lies, the actual lies, and the deliberate intention to lie to me by Lutfur Rahman. There is no basis in law. So why did he lie? And why did his cabal lie? And what did he think he was doing, inviting Abu Tahir to a meeting that was supposed to be about the council's behavior in response to my claims based on law? What was Abu Tahir doing there at that meeting instead of Colin Cormack, who should have been there, and other council employees concerned? The fact that I defend the collective name of the community against the collective racist attacks does not create an impunity or immunity from the obligation that Lutfur Rahman owes to me as a highly known and active constitutional law advocate. How did he assume that he could just forget about all of those because he could call me Baisab? A stupid, insulting, outrageous kind of abuse and disrespect. If he was born in the 60s, I was already past my degree. I had already finished university, ordinary kind of formal education by the time he was born. I had done studies outside and inside the institutions. And this applies to everyone, every single one that is in Tower Hamlets doing quote politics. Every single one is of that kind of relationship. I have been teaching people with greater intelligence than all these persons combined would possess the intelligence. And so therefore, what was it that he was kind of relying on to call me Baisab and then to ignore the very serious legal obligations that he owed to me in law and owed to me in accordance with his duties? And it was Afsana Begum was, as a member of the mayor's office, that wrote to me a lying series of emails, either on behalf of Ohid Ahmed or on behalf of the administration fronted by Lutfur Rahman. It was a pack of lies. Why did she do that? Who told Afsana Begum to write to me these lying emails? And when Lutfur Rahman had this kind of gathering in Canary Wharf, in a building in Canary Wharf, before the 22nd of May 2014 mayoral miselection, Lutfur Rahman, got Alibor Chaudhry to invite me at the last minute to go there. Whatever had given him the idea that I would go there. How dare he insult me and insult decades of my campaigning work by sending Alibor Chaudhry to send me a message, asking Alibor Chaudhry to send me a message to go there. How dare he? Lutfur Rahman knew that I was opposed to the corrupt mayor system. How did he think that I would be going there and supporting the mayor system? That is not just insulting, that is stupidity. It showed that he lost his cognitive skills and his memory. So Afsana Begum wrote to me about that time, about 2013, or just whenever the last time she was there in that post, in that office. And she denied all the kind of duties that the council owed. And she kind of sent a series of stupid emails that were, again, as I say, pre-Lilliputian in their stupidity, because they didn't engage with the facts and the evidence, and they did not apologize for their failure to engage with the facts and the evidence. Now, anyone who knows about tar hamlers and knows about the various references to tar hamlers being a Muslim state, considered a Muslim state by the racists who kind of see the presence of Muslims in tar hamlers and in the politics, so-called, would have known about programs like the one that Andrew Gilligan published on Channel 4, Dispatches program on the 1st of March 2010. In that program, there was not a single member of the community, Bangladeshi community, that spoke there in favor of Lutfur Rahman at all. And there was not a member of the community that spoke in favor of Tar Hamlets Council. And when the Channel 4 did a shorter program after Lutfur Rahman became, quote, mayor, Channel 4 actually broadcast a segment showing Lutfur Rahman using a taxi or kind of publicly paid for vehicle to transport his laundry from a nearby place to his address in the old Montague Street. What was he doing? I mean, when did he become disabled? Was he physically disabled, or did his mind lose and leave him, and he became mentally incapable of cognitive function? This is a community, the Bangladeshis in the UK, that is essentially here to escape poverty and hunger and indignity in the place of their origin. If there is an access to any institutional politics and political position carrying any power to any member of the community or any descendant of any person who came here during the 60s or 70s, then the last thing that person should be doing would be to do what Lutfur Rahman has done, or what the others have been alleged to have been doing, or what the other three councillors charged and convicted and jailed have been doing. And where are the leaders of the community? Who are the leaders? One channel refers to me as community activist. Now that is a multiple criminality. To call me a community activist as if I'm a pre-Lilliputian moron. That stupidity is born of jealousy based on the emptiness of the brain. I am not a community activist, never have been. And I have been an advocate of the highest standard since long before that idiot was physically, biologically born. So where are these leaders with their voice for the community's honor against these criminals who have been abusing their posts, elected posts and publicly paid for posts? They should be setting an example to the host community, the mainly white people, that our character is better than, many people, indigenous people, that our character is an example and we are hardworking, we are respectful and we are dutiful and we are fair and we are ethical and we are moral. Where are these leaders calling for this? If I'm a community activist, then of course I cannot be the leader. And yet, for 50 years, I've been leading not only the defense of the community, the Bangladeshis, but the defense of the wider community on all sorts of issues and matters. How is it that criminals who run this so-called ethnicity-linked media don't see that, to the point where they don't even know what my name is? One criminal who apologized to the Hindu community allowed my name to be distorted in August 2020. Now that liar himself presented a long program on the 17th, 18th, 19th. It was recorded on the 17th, the main interview with me, and the final version was broadcast on the 19th of January 2006. And I'm the most known Bangladeshi in this country, despite the stupidity and denial and petty jealousy of the pre-Lilliputian morons. Where are these liars raising their voice against corruption, either alleged or actually perpetrated by any elected person, elected in the name of the Bangladeshi community, elected with the votes of the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets or in any other borough in the United Kingdom? Where are they? When I spoke to one of the ex-councillors in Tower Hamlets about Lutfur Rahman, this particular ex-councillor said a string of things that showed that Lutfur Rahman was mentally dysfunctioning and was not fit. Now, this was not something I had said to them. I had said to them the facts of what Lutfur Rahman was failing to address. But this was the response to me. Now, that was the response, but separately from that particular individual, the dossier that was submitted to the Labour Party's National Executive Committee in 2010, before the matter of the candidature for the mayor post in the name of the Labour Party was finally resolved, the dossier was put to the National Executive Council of the Labour Party at that time by the former candidate for mayor post, former, that is, in the 2010 election, Abbas Uddin alias Halal. And one of the things that he said in his dossier, or was said in the dossier that was put in the name of Abbas Uddin alias Halal, said that Lutfur Rahman had been brainwashed by the fundamentalists. Now, whoever the fundamentalists were is not material. What is material is that Abbas Uddin alias Halal said what he said in there, or agreed to send that dossier in containing that assertion. Now, all the evidence of Lutfur Rahman's stupid behavior shows that he was really brainwashed. Whether he was brainwashed by fundamentalists is immaterial, because he was brainwashed out of any state of fitness to justify his being called the executive mayor, because he was not behaving like the executive mayor. He was behaving like the abuser of the executive mayor post. And he was spinning lies after lies after lies. When I asked this media advisor whom he paid, whom Lutfur Rahman paid hundreds of thousands of pounds of council money as an advisor, when during a do where I was not invited, but I heard about it and I turned up, not because I wanted a cup of tea or any meal or anything. I was offered a cup of tea by this Muhammad Jubair. Was he showing me extra respect? I don't think so. I think he was trying to cool me, calm me, because he thought, and if he did think that, there would have been factual basis for his thinking that I would be justified in publicly denouncing Lutfur Rahman in front of all the other people, which I never did. I never did because of my prestige, because my mother taught me, a long time ago, my mother taught me a lesson that I never have knowingly broken. My mother said that there is a limit to the kind of people that you actually have a row with or have a kind of argument with. He said you don't go below a particular level. My mother said that because she thought that any engagement, any rows, any engagement that I may have with people of a particular kind of standing, unless I was having a kind of exchange with somebody of my similar, comparable kind of standing in my mother's view and in my character, then regardless of the outcome, the actual thing would demean me more than it would demean or expose the other party. Now, with Lutfur Rahman, by that time I had already kind of understood that he did not belong to the particular standard of behavior and character that would justify my publicly engaging in an exchange with him. So I remembered my mother's teaching, and I didn't publicly engage in any exchange with Lutfur Rahman during the 6 calendar years. And because of my mother's teaching, I suffered great amounts of losses. And I suffered great amount of kind of frustrations, not just about Lutheran, but about all the others that were lying for him. Now, that is a very serious moral lesson I'm sharing with the world, whoever is watching this. My mother's teaching, who would have thought that of all the sources of learning, enlightenment, and everything, I would, time after time, remember my mother's teaching. And it would stop me publicly engaging in certain exchanges with certain people. Not because I couldn't face them, far from it. The opposite is the case. But at the end of the exchange or encounter, my mother said, I would be the loser of vital kind of credibility and honor because of who I was kind of confronting. And I think that so far I have allowed quite a few dozen criminals to think that I'm not kind of encountering them. They must think, some of them, if not everyone, that I am somehow hesitant to encounter or kind of confront them because there might be some weakness in my case. Absolutely not. And so I cannot name the other criminals and people without any standard in this particular kind of program, except to say that the reason I didn't engage in a public encounter with Lutfur Rahman is because of my mother taught me. Lutfur Rahman was completely ill-advised by pre-Lilliputian kind of cabals. And they sank him, and they sank the community's name with him. The reason why the Kudilar campaign is talking about Lutfur Rahman is not to give him any credit, because he will never get any credit on the basis of his behavior, but to warn people in the community that any publicly kind of endorsed position that is acquired or sought in the name of the Bangladeshis or in the name of the wider community must be only given to anyone seeking it if the people in the community are objectively satisfied that this person or these type of persons will not dishonor the community, will not bring disrepute and disgrace to the community. So we shall be continuing in the next part. This is 20 minutes past midnight Greenwich Mean Time on the morning of Tuesday, the 3rd of November 2020.